Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Happy Asian Males. This is episode 7 with Sabo Shen.
Yes. Hey, Brandon, how's it going?
Good, and of course Brandon. So today, you know what? I don't know exactly what we're going to talk about.
I think there's some current events that have come up today, and obviously for anyone watching, hopefully the audio quality is coming out a lot better. We're not sitting in my front yard where there's a bunch of planes flying over, and as you can see, we have some fairly professional looking setup here with the H6 Zoom recorder. So as you can see, that means people are listening, and we're upgrading. We're
Bionic.
Okay. So there were a couple of topics. I think the last time we met, we had talked about, why is it that there are people that, understand that they need to make some changes in their lives and ultimately, for whatever reason, decide not to make that change. And we were both going to kind of do some homework about thinking about this subject and to come back with some action items of how people could get from thinking about doing something to actually doing it. And the second thing I wanted to talk about was United Airlines and the whole fiasco of what happened. I know a lot of people think that it was just poor customer service. Was it racially motivated? I mean, what was that?
It's a stir, man. There's a lot going on around it.
Yeah, so where do you want to start today?
I actually have only been hearing through memes and making fun of videos. I don't actually know the story about the whole United fiasco, except there was an Asian fellow dragged off of a plane.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll give you a little insight into what happened to the best of my ability, and obviously, if there's anyone fact checking, I might be wrong. I'm going off of memory here, but
there's fake news to worry about too. So
yes. So the flight, United Airlines, it wasn't a huge aircraft, decent sized, and they needed 4 individuals to get off the plane because they had 4 pilots that needed to be in Chicago, and if the 4 pilots didn't make it, it would delay a bunch of different other flights. So they asked for 4 volunteers to leave, and they first offered $400. No one volunteered. Then they offered $800. No one else volunteered, and ultimately after that is they just said, we're going to select people, and you guys are going to get off the plane. And
well, okay.
So the first couple that they selected, they begrudgingly got off. And then when they selected Dr. Dow told them that he's a physician and he needed to be back in, I can't remember if it was Kentucky or Chicago or wherever they were going. He had patients to see the very next day. And ultimately, they couldn't remove him. He refused to leave. And then they called the airport. Or I don't know if it was airport security or police. I believe it was the police. And then the police came and ultimately physically removed him. Now, the way they removed him was, it was pretty painful to watch. I mean, the guy's 69 years old. I probably wouldn't have resisted at that point. I just probably would have just gone, to be honest. But that's not neither here nor there. What did end up happening is it appears that as they drag him out, the doctor's head hits the side of a seat, and he is bleeding from the mouth.
Oh, okay.
So his glasses are all sideways, he's bleeding from the mouth, and instead of asking him if he's okay, they essentially drag him out by the arms like he was, cattle, or I don't even know.
It was a moment of weakness that they capitalized on, basically.
I mean,
I think stunned, so they were just keep going.
I mean, it really should have been more. I mean, when you're watching it, you're like, oh shit, the guy got knocked out. So the natural human reaction, I think, at that point is are you okay? But instead, they were just okay, he's knocked out. This is a great time to just drag him out. And so a lot of these videos that they've been showing online, there's no time lapse.
There's no context either. They just show him bloody, pretty much.
Well, they show him not bloody until they remove him, and then you see his head hit. So you know the blood is from the impact.
Oh.
And they have some footage of him at the front of the plane where he's really discombobulated. He's just saying, I want to go home, and he's behaving like someone that has been concussed. So,
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, definitely excessive force was used. That part is clear. That part is clear. Now, what isn't clear is if the man was a Caucasian doctor, would the police officer have grabbed him? If he was a woman, would they have grabbed him? Or would they have, like, the common decency of when he hit his head and went limp to go check on him? And I initially thought that this wasn't racially motivated. He was just randomly picked. But when I think about just after he got knocked out and the way he treated him, I don't think it's out of the realm to ask if race was a part of it, because I just have a tough time believing that if it was a Caucasian doctor, that it would ever got to that point where a policeman was physically removing him and after he gets knocked out, just drags him out.
Yeah, that's. I mean, so just playing like devil's advocate, like, how would you go about telling someone, like, or asking the question, like, how would we find out if it was racially motivated?
Well, honestly, I think in this scenario, the only person that really knows is the police officer. The rest of us are just speculating, and part of me, like, doesn't even want to speculate this part because in the court of law, this is an open shut case of excessive force being used. So, but I think in the larger context of what's going on in America, as far as people feeling emboldened to act out in nationalism, and by nationalism I don't mean just being America first, I'm talking about white America first, and I think that, we see a change, I see a change, I see people just saying, like, this is what we have Trump for, that's why you guys are leaving, people actually utilizing that as a reason for kicking someone out of a specific area or telling someone they're going to get deported. So, I think because of those things, I'm more comfortable talking about it in this racial context because, everything is so racially charged right now. And to me, it's, I mean, I'm just simulating this in my mind, but if it was a Caucasian doctor that they grabbed and his head hit the side of the seat and he was bleeding from the mouth, passed out, they would have stopped and checked on the doctor to make sure that he was okay.
Yeah, and I think that has a lot to do with what, like, I was just having a conversation over lunch about what we consider to be human. Like, we don't consider homeless people human beings a lot of times because they don't fit the typical, like, profile and, of, like, what a human is. Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah. Well, you just kind of, I mean, you don't look at them as an animal, but you don't look at them like the same way, like
your sister.
You would think. Yeah,
you don't identify with them for some odd reason, but I think that's a mindset, right? That, like, I look at them and I have empathy. I'm like, maybe they chose that, and they're asking me for money, but I don't think that they're anything less. I just say, no, I just don't have any for you.
Yeah.
But, like, it comes from, I think, I'm speculating from a place of maybe they just didn't see him as a human being. Why wouldn't you have checked on it if it wasn't a human being, like, in their brain? Or maybe it was just in the rush of the moment, they just wanted to get out of the aisleway because there's cameras and, like, people were just freaking out, just move the body, like...
Yeah. I think those are really fair things to bring up, and, I tried to look at this holistically and not just from the aspect that, like, United Airlines fucked up yet again, and, honestly, it's like what I said earlier. If it was me, I would not have behaved the same way as a doctor. I mean, it comes to a point where once they're calling law enforcement, and even if it's totally fucked up that they overbooked and that they're asking you to leave, at some point, like, complying with the law is always easier than not complying with the law.
Yeah.
What I probably would have done is not sign anything that said, like, I couldn't sue the airlines for any loss of, like, being delayed. But I probably myself would have just been like, okay, well, I may have resisted when it was just the airline attendants, but once they called the cops, I probably would have been like, okay, things are getting a little bit serious right now. It'd probably be better if I just left. Now, that, to me, still doesn't justify the way the police handled the situation.
No.
Just because he wasn't behaving properly didn't mean you needed to use excessive force. And, I mean, there's a lot of other... I mean, the fact that airlines routinely overbook that is an issue. You can't overbook flights and have it in the fine print that you could be kicked off of a flight when nobody reads the fine print. I mean, you could always say that's the consumer's fault, but even if you did read the fine print, like I have a college degree and I've gone to law school, and reading the fine print is still very dense for someone like myself. Yeah, so to expect anyone to be able to read the fine print in the amount of time that you need to agree or disagree, and then to also have the ability to digest the legal chops and figure out like if this is something I'm going to agree or not agree to, it's not practical.
You just want to go somewhere. Like, you just want to get on a plane and be like, I mean, I think the next worst airline is probably Spirit, because they charge you for printing boarding passes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. I didn't find that out until I found out the hard way. Never flying Spirit again. But yeah, like it's almost like, well, I mean, from a business standpoint, this is just going to really cause a lot of havoc for United. But from a humanistic, like, basic rights that, like, looking at most law enforcement, like people who have left the force because they've had disagreements with how things are done on the force, it's generally like the consensus I've gotten is that they're training these guys for lethal force, but they're not training them for a lot of like non-violent communication. That's not their primary mode. To deal with things like, I mean, how many times do you have to remove people from an airplane? That's not a common thing.
Right. I mean, that's a very salient point, and those are things that I went through my head. Like, all right, this person, he's having tons of cameras being pointed at him. He's trying to probably do this with the least amount of resistance, trying to do it as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. But, I just think there could have been 100 different ways that it could have been handled that wouldn't result in someone being knocked out and bleeding from the mouth. And ultimately, I mean, it wasn't just that. It was the way United responded. I mean, they started putting out articles that talked about like the 98 prescriptions that Dr. Dow had written in exchange for like sexual favors. Just all these.
They tried to just make him look bad?
Yeah.
As if like he was the culprit in all of this?
I mean, honestly, like, for me, like, I'm a super objective person, and I'm like, okay, well, I did want to know that about Dr. Dow, but just as a patient, I would never go to that guy, but that doesn't excuse the way United acted because, well, they knew nothing about him. So, this is why I believe, like, there was some sort of racial motivation because, I mean, the way they try to cover it up is a very similar tactics when there's like a Latino or a black person that commits a crime that is accused of a crime and they're trying to figure out if he's right or wrong, or if they're trying to deflect blame, is they just start bringing up stuff from their past, stuff that is irrelevant to the actual incident, but will get someone to start going, well, at least the person got kicked off was a piece of shit.
I think in logical fallacies, like in logic, that's called a ad hominem, where you're misattributing something to a person's character and not what's going on in the situation. Like, if you and I are having an argument over chicken McNuggets, I'm like, well, Sabo, you have a bald head. That's like why chicken nuggets don't taste good. It's because of something I'm attributing to you.
Right.
It has nothing to do with the flavor of the chicken nuggets.
Correct.
It's an attack on you.
Correct.
As a character.
Correct.
So that's what they're doing, is like they're not even they're not even acknowledging what is actually going on. They're just saying this person is a terrible person. He deserved it.
Yep. And I mean,
through the behavior.
Exactly. And like I said, the only person that really knows is the police officer that removed him, and I'm sure he's doing a lot of thinking about what he could have done different. But my main thing is like with the airlines, it's like, I understand you want to book the flights and
get the money,
and and I also understand in the fine print you guys are allowed to do this. But if you just think about, like, most people, like, I fly a few times a month, but most people probably fly a few times a year at most. So to be bumped on one of the few times you're actually traveling is just a huge inconvenience, and the airlines need to figure out a better way to make sure that the revenue is at a place where they don't need to overbook flights. I mean, every as I researched this, more flights are overbooked than not. They just expect half the people to drop out, and they would much rather just give out a $400 voucher and have an overbooked flight than to book it properly. And for someone that's traveling, especially if you have, patients waiting for you, that's a problem. That's a problem that I don't think they should be allowed to overbook. Just because it's in the fine print, I believe they should be doing. They should not allow. I don't think that should be allowed.
Yeah, because what if it's like, you're counting on this and it's like it's an important event and like you just cannot not be there.
Exactly.
I'm gonna. Yeah, I think I've been on overbooked flights before, and it sucks because the person that you're coordinating with on the other end is, or maybe like all your other plans, or maybe it's through a travel agency. I don't know, but it's just kind of a bad practice that we've kind of learned to accept.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if like we want. This may change now after people are finding this out about because overbooking is definitely being told in this story.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. I didn't know that the flights were overbooked. I just thought that the airlines did a brilliant job of just getting them like to 95% capacity. I was like, this is great. They figured it out. And then after this, once I started doing research, it was like, no, they routinely overbook, and they just know that half the people that book the flights, or a percentage of the people that book the flights just won't show up. And of the people that do, a $200, $400, $600 voucher is a much better cost of opportunity than to not sell a few seats.
It's like when hotels that are casinos give away comped hotel rooms because they know they're going to get their money back for having this person.
Right.
The free drinks that they give out. It seems like an initial loss, but I think that's literally what it is. They're gambling on this. They're taking a gamble.
Exactly. And I mean, in the case of the casinos, it's less insidious because you still get your room and you still get to gamble. It's not like if you don't win, your room gets taken away.
You have to sleep somewhere else. You have to go rent time with a hooker.
Basically, if you lose this much money, you get to sleep here at least.
I know, and she could sleep away or plan how you're going to explain to your significant other how you gamble away, whatever you gamble away.
So I'm surprised. What were you doing that kind of, this seemed to be like on everyone's radar this week. I was surprised that it wasn't on your radar.
It was, but like this weekend I was actually in LA or Van Nuys and filming what turned out to be a short documentary on drifting.
Oh, wow. So you went back to the same spot that you learned how to drift?
Yeah, and I met the guy, but also because we had it's funny, we talked about not seeing sexy Asian people in Hollywood because he deals directly with Hollywood, like people wanting to be stunt drivers and stuff. So, and he was just like, yeah, like he's lucky he's 6 foot something, and he's not the typical like soft-spoken Japanese guy. He's introverted, but he's well-spoken.
Right.
But like he said that producers would literally say, "Oh my God, thank God you're not ugly and small and short." And he was just like, what the actual fuck? What if I wasn't?
Thank goodness you're not actually short, small, or ugly.
Yes.
Jesus.
And
so that's what they expect the norm to be then, short,
Asian
small,
people.
And ugly. Damn.
Yeah. And
that's a low.
And so that became a thing where it's like, okay, I want to talk to people who are Asian and they're in different life paths than typical people would be. And just see what it's like. And also turns out that he really attracts introverts.
He attracts introverts.
And teaches them well, like, because he is one himself. He uses drifting to break. That's how the documentary is turning out, at least, is one storyline, is he uses to break people out of their shells.
That's awesome.
They have to repattern everything they've been taught about driving, which is to stay controlled, in your lane, get out of your lane, bust on the gas, make noise, beat on the car, everything you're told not to do.
Right.
Which is take care of your car, stay in your lane, be quiet, don't use too much gas. He's like, use all the gas, use all the tires, make noise, go buck wild. I trust you to have a good time.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And there was a really ironic moment where my cousin, who's the videographer, we tell him he's going to be the one learning to drift and I'm going to film. So we put him in the driver's seat and had a drifting lesson.
Yeah, nice. How did he do in front of the camera?
Oh, he got nervous. He got real nervous, and this guy's name's Naoki. He was like calling him out. He was like, "Hey, so you got to step out. You've got to like." He was like, "Yeah, I was nervous," and he's like, "Yeah, you got to go with it, man. You got to step it up a little bit. Even if you are an introvert, you can. It's easy to go back behind the camera, be in the shell. Be in your car is a literal shell." So he was talking about progress and stepping outside of your comfort zones.
I mean, that's really cool. I mean, I never thought you would learn any life lessons going to a drifting class.
I didn't either.
Right? So
I had no idea.
You know, and I really think, I mean, for me, especially with jiu-jitsu, you know, there's so many analogs of I'm like, oh, I can apply this to my regular life. And with drifting, you know, it was hard to think of like, well, how do you apply drifting to your regular life? But it's interesting to kind of hear like, well, it's, you know, part of it was like you were saying, it's like you're conditioned to operate your car in a certain way. And it's kind of like when you grow up, you're taught to behave a certain way. And when you realize you don't have to, you know, it's almost like, you know, being the out of control drift, right? You're like, well, this seems scary. Wait, it's actually fun, not scary.
And I think the same could be said about like people in martial arts, right? Like doing a kata. I understand it's a beautiful practice, like, you know, to learn body movement and awareness, but what does that have to do with actual fighting? I'm sure that argument comes up a lot,
yeah,
too.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, there's direct correlations of how things actually help you, and then there's the indirect side, right? And I believe the katas, or in the instance of the katas, it's the discipline of doing something
consistently.
Yeah.
Practice, repetition.
Correct, sure. And it's like the least fun part of
not sexy stuff.
Yeah. I think to me it was like the least, like I never wanted to do it. Then as I got older, I like really admired the people that were really good at forms, because
I used to make fun of the people in Golden Gate Park doing Tai Chi and stuff, and now I'm like, they're on to stuff.
Yeah.
But like, what carried over, you know, to help make some steps from jiu-jitsu? Like, did anything kind of stick out as...
Well, I think by the time I started jiu-jitsu, I was already 37 or 38, so I was, you know, I already understood, like, the proper way of learning, you know, but, you know, I think when I was learning capoeira in my 20s, you know, I was... What's a good way to put it? You know, I just wanted to do the stuff that I thought would impress the girls. The flips, all the hard moves.
For sure.
And I was basically like the guy with the worst fundamentals, but like the best, like high flying moves, you know?
Yeah.
And, well, what that ends up being is, if you don't have the fundamentals, your game just can't expand from the flips. You know, it's the incorporation of the basic moves with the flips and how they blend together to allow you to hide and disguise and do all these cool things. And, you know, one without the other really doesn't help. And it kind of goes back, if all you know is katas, you're going to get your ass kicked. You know, you have to know how to fight too. You know, you have to know how to really apply it. But I believe like when you approach it from both sides or from all sides, then you just become a better practitioner, right? I mean, I'm sure with lifting, you know, most people's goals at first is like, how do I get as strong as possible? Then when they start learning the proper technique, they want to get the technique better so that they can lift more. And it's like a process that builds on top of each other versus, you know, just going, I have this singular goal, and you just drive towards that singular goal the whole time.
Well, I definitely skipped a lot of the basics. I picked up the fast, showy moves of the snatch and the clean and jerk.
Okay.
And then I failed to do all the stuff that actually gets you better at it. So I got stuck for a while. Because my ego is like, no, you're okay. You're just good enough to, like, make people go, ooh. But then, you know, the people involved in weightlifting are like, dude, you're not impressing anybody.
Yeah.
You got to, like, fucking do your shit.
That's so funny. I mean, it's such a parallel path to my capoeira, which was...
I was relating to that.
People that don't know the full game of capoeira, they would look at me and think, like, he knows the best stuff. Yeah. But anyone that knew, like, a complete game would just look at my stuff and just be like, okay, he knows how to do the clean and jerk, basically, you know, and that's it. Yeah. You know, and it was basically, one time the guy was like, the mestre said, okay, no flips today. And I literally...
Were you like,
I realized that all of my bad technique, it got exposed, because when you do flips, people just forget about like the setup. They just remember the flip, right? So when I couldn't flip and they had to see like all of my setups and all of my basics. It looked like, super basic, or someone that hadn't been practicing. So you could really, it's like if someone could do a flip but not a cartwheel, and then all of a sudden you're like, why can't you cartwheel? Wasn't that the proper, and then obviously when you don't have the right foundation, then you can't build a solid structure on top of that. So have to go back to learn the basics and then start building the skill set up from there.
I hear what you're saying, and I think with the question in the beginning, like that you pose, is like, how can we take action steps from going from like theoretical to like actually making a change that you've decided on? And I think early on, a lot of kids are taught to just get it right and not trial and error. So I think the first thing is to start accepting that trial and error has to be part of that basic process.
Right. Oh man, that's such a good...
Do you know what I mean?
That's such a good recommendation, because I don't think of myself as a perfectionist. I think probably because I smoke so much cannabis, but
you relax your brain a little bit.
What you were saying, I think, when I was thinking about like the certain things that I didn't want to start, it had to go back to like, I wasn't gonna be perfect, or I wouldn't be one of the better people right away, and I think that's a really important thing, because even like someone like myself who thought I should know better, it's prevented me from wanting to go do certain classes, because I knew that I would probably be the worst guy, and that affected, like, my ego got in the way. Like, you need to go do some like stretching at home and get more flexible before going to yoga. It's like, no, just go to yoga. Just go to yoga. You don't need to go and impress anyone or show anyone that or I'm sure you hear this all the time. It's like, I gotta get into a certain amount of physical shape before I start working out. Yeah, you're like, yes. What kind of logic is that?
From each side, one is the perceived expectations of the person, like, to be perfect before they even begin to change. That change is not going to be, it's going to look linear, right? Like, I guess, I don't know, like, I don't know where I was going with that thought, but accepting that you're going to make mistakes. And I think we're talking about the growth versus the fixed mindset.
Oh, I think we've touched upon that, like, loosely on a few of our conversations.
Do you want to go over that really quick? Because I think that plays
into Yeah. Why don't you kind of cover it, since it's top of mind for you?
Well, I guess fixed mindset just is having the idea that, okay, I'm stuck this way, there are no other options, I was just born this way, or my personality just like that, my dad was always like that, or, my family was just always like that.
I'm just a shy guy. Or
just a shy guy. And then growth mindset is, yes, I am this way, but it can change. There are different possibilities. I don't know what they are, but that's what the growth mindset kind of embraces, is that you're going to try on different hats. And it may look silly, like when you're trying, like, I'm actually going through quite a bit of beginner phase myself in my own training program. I'm stepping away from Olympic lifting. I'm doing things in movements that I don't normally do, and it's weird. I'm like stepping everywhere wrong and kind of like, oh, that's weird, and like, making the funny faces, and it actually feels pretty good. But before, I would have avoided a lot of the basics because I was like, I'm not doing it perfect, it's just that way, I don't want to.
Yeah. And I mean, to me, that, I don't want to say like that one thing solves it for everyone listening, but to me, I think that is a big part of what keeps people from doing the things that they need to do to improve their lives. And, if we take the most simplest things, like quitting smoking or eating better, I do believe a lot of people just think like, I'll probably quit, so why even try? Or at some point, I'm going to gain all this weight back, so why even try? And they get into this, like, weird, well, I guess if I don't try at all, I won't disappoint myself. I might not be super happy, but I won't disappoint myself again.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that's a really strong driver of like what prevents people from doing the things that could really impact their lives in a positive way.
And I remember when I was still smoking cigarettes, and I was like, I'd written on a piece of paper, I was like, I want to smoke cigarettes less. Actually writing that down and then seeing that had a strong effect on me.
Yep.
Seeing that written, and also, but what also went through my head was I'm scared of how I'm going to feel when I don't have it. I don't know how I'm going to feel. I have no point of reference that I'm supposed to know how it's supposed to feel. It's supposed to feel good, but I don't know what it feels like.
Yeah.
People just tell me it's very good, and I think that was a big factor for me going through my head. I was afraid of what I was going to feel, like that it's not okay to feel these things, like
Yeah.
because you may feel disappointed, you may like mess up, and then like when kids get something wrong, they cry sometimes, and they're like man, and then just pout,
Yeah.
and I guess we don't give ourselves that permission to pout and fail a lot either. So
Yeah. I mean, it really is like it's an interesting thing about like the desire to be perfect, but you can't get to a high level without failing a lot.
a lot,
So
a lot.
I mean, in jiu-jitsu they have that term, there's no losing, only learning. And, if you adopt that, then every time someone chokes you out, it really is like, you should have defended your neck, or you shouldn't have let them grab your wrist so hard, or, and it really is like, like I had posted like I was defeated the other day.
What was that?
Most people thought it was a physical thing, but it was really just more of a mental thing. I had been going through just trying to solve some issues with work that were like super intense, and I was losing a lot of sleep over it, and I just didn't want to let myself rest until this thing was resolved. But it just wasn't something that would be resolved overnight, or even in a week, or even a month. It's the big picture type of thing,
Ooh,
So a lot of what I was talking about was just like, just being able to take myself out of the situation, look at it objectively, pull my ego out of it that wanted to win so bad, even though it was bad for my health to be like obsessive about this, and just go, look, all right, today you couldn't handle it, like get some rest. Tomorrow you'll be better. And tomorrow was better,
Nice.
It was just like, it was okay. I think here's a good example is if someone's like very gritty, like I think that's a super like one of the most important traits for my belief of someone to be able to, if they're doing work on themselves to like better themselves. If they're not a gritty person, I just think like at some point they're just gonna give up because it's gonna be tough. When you're doing
grit, like, or I've got the
yeah, like gusto, yeah. Like, okay, I did this once, it didn't work. I did this twice, it didn't work. I did this 3 times, it didn't work. Well, I know it works, so I'm gonna just keep doing it until I know. I've seen other people do this. Like a lot of people will just like, once or twice if it didn't work, they just give up. But the flip side is like, if you keep doing something and it doesn't work, someone's just like, you're not gritty, you're just fucking stubborn.
There's
so
a fine line.
Yeah, and ultimately, like, yeah, my whole point is there's a very fine line between being gritty and being stubborn, and I had to just objectively look that I was being stubborn. I was no longer being gritty. There was nothing to be gained from trying to gut this thing out. Yeah. If anything, it was just making me sicker, making me more stressed, just like the downward spiral. So, and I mean, just kind of recognizing it. And like you said, it's a fine line. And that's why I do believe the only way you find out about yourself is to always put yourself in these new situations and see how you react. Like I didn't know if I could get punched in the face and fight back until I got punched in the face. Before I got punched in the face, I was like, yeah, I'd be able to fight back. But deep down, I was like, well, what if I just get knocked out? That's a possibility too, right?
Yeah.
And then once I got punched in the face, I was like, okay, well, the possibility of me getting knocked out is still there, but I also know, like, I've been punched in the face and not been knocked out, so I'm ready for this shit, And
you hit both ends of the spectrum.
Exactly. And that's why, when you're doing all these things, I'm like, oh shit, you're just gonna be able to uncover all these layers of, like, whatever assumptions you had of yourselves, you'll be able to validate, or maybe even eradicate some of these things that may have been holding you back too.
And it's funny you just mentioned that, because the reason why I'm doing drifting now is because when I was a teenager and a young college student, my mindset was so fixed. I thought that fixing cars and getting the right parts, similar to like, getting the right workout clothes, is going to get you in shape. It's not the mindset. Because like this guy was like, he had this unimpressive Nissan car that was beat to hell, but it was prepared for drifting. And I was like, man, I would have way overbuilt my car. Just dumping all this money and not actually into any input and feedback.
Oh, yeah.
So I didn't have the mindset. I wasn't ready for it. So only now that I matured enough was I actually ready to learn how to drift.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting, like, the self-actualization of knowing, like, when you could actually get something out of an experience. Like I remember... I remember, I think I may have told this story, but in high school, one of my uncles had me read Anthony Robbins books,
Oh,
and I was
in
like,
high school?
Yeah, I was like super motivated, but like a lot of what Anthony Robbins talks about is like, he was like so depressed, he understood like these feelings of not doing anything and how he had to like motivate himself, and like...
No young kid knows what that's like.
Yeah, I'm just like, well, I want the success that he has, but all this like stuff that's driving him, like I haven't experienced any of it. Like I could like in a movie, like kind of like simulate like, oh, okay, he didn't live up to his dreams like when he was a teenager and in his 20s, and now that he's 30, he was like, fuck it, I gotta do something, So I can imagine that, but I didn't have the life experience to really go, oh, okay, this is what it's like to be 28 and make minimum wage and have to feel like, if I don't do something by the time I'm 30, I may be making minimum wage my whole life.
And I think the most change happens such out of a built-up insecurity that we don't even know. Like I think of the majority of my 20s was this lingering insecurity, like building up. And I just finally did something about it. Like just because I didn't want people to like ask me about it anymore. You know what I mean? Like where you're just like, hey, so what are you doing with your life? I don't know. Just like, and just to get people just off your back.
Yeah.
And it's like when we're young, we always want to focus on like the glory parts. We don't even realize that insecurity is the deep driver for a lot of success in a lot of people's lives.
Yeah.
Being bad at something really is a blessing sometimes.
I mean, I think what's cool, what I heard you say earlier about, especially with your movement training and how it's making you feel like, like a beginner.
Noob.
I mean, to me, that's the most important thing to like keep someone grounded, is to do new things, because it puts you back in that mindset of just like the insecurity of like, am I doing this right? Like the wanting to please the teacher, all of those things where if you're just like the strength and conditioning coach, or like in my case, like, I employ people.
You're the one in charge.
Yeah. And it's challenging, but when everyone's like kowtowing to you, it's easy to kind of get in that phase of like, I know my shit, I'm good, or I'm better than these people. And ultimately, I think like always doing new things, it just helps you remember like what it's like when you don't have like that confidence of all the years of building to this level of acumen of whatever it is that you're doing.
But also too, like when we try these new things, we can, that feeling of like, oh, I gotta like go, that feeds into the things we are still good at, like the things that have lots of years invested in, like say in your company or something, in your line of work. So you could do something new and bring one of those realizations like, oh man, maybe I should have asked more questions, and then bring that to your own, like problem that you're trying to solve or something you're trying to get better at, and it probably is the piece that we're missing.
Yeah, I agree with that. And hold on for a second, I have a big loogie in my mouth.
Did we get that on the mic?
Did it pick up?
I think I see. Yeah,
dude, for the past few weeks, I couldn't even get it out.
That's the worst, when it's like stuck.
Yeah, dude.
You know where it is.
I almost made myself throw up from like trying to.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's when I was like, all right, I need to just let this thing play its course. Um,
It, I was just thinking back to I went to this random business lecture talk at Stanford, and it turns out this guy was Mark Zuckerberg's business school teacher.
oh wow.
And where I'm like, okay, I hear it, and I'm
Yeah,
listening.
yeah.
And he talks about how the difference why it's hard to have innovation in the medical field, because in startups, the people who get the most trial and error cycles done, and like they don't get butthurt over doing things wrong. They just keep doing a bunch, get it right. They have feedback cycles.
Yep.
But in medicine, because there's such a precise element like airlines, you can't be experimenting with the airlines,
Right, right.
and flying a plane or like injecting, doses of medicine. So that's why he was saying it's very difficult to make innovations in these kinds of industries. But like in business, you can do that with whatever you want, or you can apply that. How fast are we making feedback cycles? Like how fast are we dusting ourselves off? Or
Yeah.
and who's giving us feedback? Who's even telling us? Like,
Yeah. Well, I think even though we didn't have a clear plan of what we were going to talk about today, I think we actually came up with some really actionable items for people that, may have been just procrastinating about something that they've been wanting to do. And one of them is number one is just remember you're not going to be good at it. It's okay. You're going to suck. And sucking is actually going to be good in the beginning because you're going to learn a lot. Number two is I think, okay, so number one was just knowing that you're not going to be perfect at it from the get-go. I think number two was like, I guess it kind of dovetails from number one in that, you're going to want like all those, you called it like feedback loops, all those experiences of doing all these different things, seeing how you react to it, and then use those data points as ways of kind of objectively looking at your own progress of like, am I doing this right? Am I not doing this? Is this good for me, or is this not good for me?
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing was, I think the last thing for me was, to try to figure out like if you're being gritty or if you're being stubborn about
I
something.
like that the distinguishment you made, because it is a fine line to dance at, because sometimes
And I think, a lot of this is, I mean, even though I was trying to kind of come up with a system of how people can leverage this information, I really think a lot of it is individualistic, and it is about, someone doing their own work and thinking, spend time with yourself and just think about like, why do I want to do this? What do I think I'll benefit from this? And if these are all positive things, to go ahead and just jump in and do it. And, I think Nike has a great slogan, just do it, just if it interests you, don't let your own head get in the way. It's like we were talking to Gordon the other day, and when he wrote that he had to second guess whether or not he wanted to talk about the women that worked at farmers markets being hot, like it really just reminded me of the different things that we tell ourselves that really limit ourselves. Like it totally shocked me. When I read that, I was like, why would you? And then when he explained, I was like, oh, okay, I could see why you thought that, but that's the last thing you should have been thinking about. Like I mean, to me, it really does speak to the Asian male psyche of like, you like something a lot, but
your desires don't matter.
yeah, or like you just know you're not going to get it, or just something that prevents you from going, I could just get it, And we all know Gordon's like this really awesome dude that, he's nice, he just picks up new hobbies, and he seems like he's pretty good at these things right away. He's awesome cook, all the proper ingredients of like what you would want, like, your daughter or like your sister to like find in a guy, right? And why would he even feel that way? Like that is what kind of like bugs me the most about this is like, I have guys that are online that's like, hey, I saw it's happy Asian males, but it seems like you're complaining about a lot of shit, and you don't seem like someone that's like always in a bad mood. And I'm like, I'm not, but when I hear or when I read things about like my friends that kind of still have some of these issues, it's just, then it reminds me of like when I was younger and how much it kind of like sucked to be that way. So I want to, kind of vocalize, what I've learned and what's helped me.
Oh yeah, that it we're not ranting as much as telling why we're doing this, right? It's not to like, yes, it's to improve our lives just by trying a new venture, but like, because when someone hears about another relatable person going through something similar, it gives them permission to actually go through it too.
Yeah.
Which is the process of change. And a lot of times with our culture, there's a strong pressure to not veer from the path because there's a direct route to success, or what a version of success. But it often ignores a lot of the more kind of like desires that we have, like that are related to fun, or not related to money. Just things that are just out of sheer pleasure.
Yeah.
And those aren't really talked about a lot. And I think that is why, Asian people like to party really hard.
Yeah, once they find out about that.
Once they find out about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, they're fucking on it, and they get the best deals on it. They find the guy who hooks them up consistently for the lowest price.
What's interesting is like, coming from parents that were born in Asia, and like Asian culture, a lot of it is like deflecting pleasure. Suffer now.
Long-term gratification, or was it long-term delayed gratification?
Yeah, delayed gratification, and we grew up in a culture where it's all about instant gratification, and that's got to play like just an extra layer of like complexity to someone growing up here, and on top of all the Asian male issues that we've already talked about, it's just like if you just think about how we're brought up by our parents versus what society is showing us, it's also like just really dramatically different. And I just always think about how it just adds to, and maybe part of the fun of life is figuring out and finding yourself, so maybe all these layers are good, but
the mixing of different ethnicities in another country, like this is unprecedented, like in the world.
Yeah,
the kind of mixture that we have.
Yeah. And actually, now that I talk it through, it's kind of making me come to an epiphany, which is not necessarily what's right or wrong, and or as far as what you need to do, but just kind of, how you feel about something. Like does it feel good, or does it?
I read somewhere you can live the right life and not feel good about it.
Yes, that oh man, that's such it's an interesting.
I forgot where that came from.
It's such an interesting quote because, I mean, and I apologize if I've told this story before, but I used to take acting classes.
No, I don't think you did.
And the acting teacher used to say, Sabo, how did that make you feel? And I used to say, I think it made me sad, and she's like, no, how did it make you feel, not how did it make you think? And I just could not ever respond with, like, it makes me feel. It just wasn't in my vocabulary. I would always say, I think it makes me. Like, I would always have to say, I think, before. And just knowing, like, Asian cultures being, much more kind of, like, academic focused versus EQ focused. Mm-hmm. I was like, whoa, that was some crazy, like, I didn't even know how I felt. I could intellectualize, like, okay, if someone yells at you, you should be mad. But I kept on saying, I think I would be mad, as opposed to, I'm mad. And that's when I started realizing, like, I don't think I'm in touch with my feelings. I just think I'm smart enough to know, like, in this situation, you should behave this way, versus actually feeling, that actual emotion. Now I'm much better at it, I mean, I've done a bunch of different things, sometimes psychedelics, sometimes just talking to people, sometimes meditating, that have, put me closer to my feelings. But it is something that today I'm still, like, I don't know when I'm super stressed out versus just a little bit stressed out. To me, it feels the same, and I need to get better at that, because as someone running a business, I need to know, like, when it's like, I had to admit, like, I was defeated the other day, and I was just being stubborn. And I think I could have kept being stubborn and gotten more sick. But, just kind of having that awareness of, okay, I think I'm going on a slippery slope. It's time to just kind of accept this for what it is and come back another day. And I do believe, like, even though I'm still a little bit sick now, like if I had continued and not accepted that, I'd probably be more sick than I am right now, because after I admitted that, I actually went to bed. Before that, I'm just like putting my head on the pillow, just like seething, like I'm gonna get this motherfucker and win, you know. And it just wasn't healthy. It just wasn't healthy. And ultimately, it's like I just needed to figure out what my own feelings were, and to kind of understand the severities of it, and not just have to be like this stoic Asian man that will repress things and just trudge forward, right?
And feelings, like, I always go back to like the Star Wars movies where like they're saying trust, your feelings serve you well, your insides serve you well, and like they're talking about intuition, because thinking is like supposed to be the servant of like our brain is supposed to be our servant, not our master.
Yes.
But like, with feelings, like someone had told me, I think their therapist had said, anger is when a boundary has been crossed. You feel anger and then if we feel like, it's like somebody's doing something that we don't like, but we need to express that boundary. And animals do it all the time. They show their fucking teeth.
Right. Or the hair stand up.
The hair stand up, and those feelings, like, if we're not living in our body, we're not going to be sensitive to those signals, and we'll just downplay them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Man, it's weird living in this society where we're essentially half computer, half animal, right? Like, like we have the hormones of an animal, but the computational analytics of a computer.
The consciousness level. Yeah, and it continually raises like a muscle. It doesn't stop. It's on 365 days a year. But yeah, it's like that split too. We are still animals in that sense. And if we're not, I think also we don't have the emotional vocabulary a lot of times. Like, we don't even know, like, we're just like, anger is the only thing guys can really express.
Yeah.
But once we get like, it's important to talk about it. It's like you have to get experience, and I mean, that's another topic for another day. Like, how come guys don't talk about their feelings?
Yeah. I mean, I've had a much more enjoyable, holistic life once I was able to get over the fact that that I had to be the man, and that I had to be the apex predator in whatever I was doing, and I watch movies, I've watched like Who Got the Girls, and I have this idea that this is what you should be as a man, this is what you should be as a CEO, and I think I talked about this in an earlier one. It was like, well, I show vulnerability as a CEO because I want my company to do better, and I don't want to say everything's hunky-dory when I have issues that need to be fixed, and when I express them, I get really good advice, and 99% of the time I implement it, and something good happens, and, I often was like, man, if I was just like old Sabo that was like, wanted everyone to think like everything was peaches and cream, like, I would have just been suffering in silence while everyone on the outside is like, Vape XL's doing great. And I'm, going, fuck, we're not doing great. Well, at least they think we're doing great. It's like, how stupid and silly is that? If you could just show all sides of your human nature, the confident side, the vulnerable side. I mean, we all have those aspects, and I think men, really focus on certain emotions, like, like you said, everyone knows how to express anger pretty damn good, but not everyone knows how to express like the other emotions properly, like some people, I think the easiest example is when you have a crush on a girl when you're young, you're like, I don't know how to tell her I like her, so I'm just gonna play tag with her or punch her in the shoulder, it's just like, I know I gotta do something, but I just don't know how to do it, right? And, hey! Hush! Four-legged friends. But, I mean, what about, I mean, have you had similar...
Oh, dude, I was just going to share an experience I had the other day. I fucked up at work. At the gym. Like, I was supposed to teach a class on Saturday, and I missed my alarm because I went to bed early and I wasn't feeling good, and I woke up to a panicky phone call from my boss saying like, everyone's here. And then luckily I got coverage for the class. There's like 10 people waiting to be taught from like another gym.
Yep, yep.
And like I just they're just like, all right, we got to cover, but we want to see you in person. I was like, oh shit, and like I was just kind of dreading this meeting because I knew I was going to get some feedback that I was not quite ready to hear at that moment. And it turned out like that because I opened up the room like to constructive criticisms, like I know I fucked up. Tell me what it is and how I can do better. And it turns out that maybe I was checking out a little bit, like I wasn't bringing my A game, and I was like, I never not bring my A game to work. But then I was like, I'm trying all these new things, it's taking my attention. If I didn't lay down my guard and say, hey, I appreciate you guys even taking the time to have this meeting, versus like, no, I'm good. I'm like, I've got it all under control. I was like, hey, listen, it was bleeding into my professional life a little bit. Sorry, it won't happen again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I felt really good inside, like, and I put my A game hat on and I fucking crushed some classes and like my own workouts and stuff. And
yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I recently had to do something similar with one of my investors, which was, I mean, there was 1,000,001 reasons. I can't go into specifics, but it's still a good example. It's basically like, it was like you. I had to be accountable for a mistake that I made. There was 1,000,001 reasons that I could have explained as to like why that mistake was made, but ultimately I also came in just going, look, I know a mistake was made. How can we prevent this from happening in the future? What do you guys want to tell me? And we had a very constructive discussion, whereas in my mind I was kind of like playing out like the scenario of, well, if he said this, I'm going to say this, and then if they say that, I'm going to say this, and kind of like defending. And I was like, man, why is my ego trying to defend when I know I fucked up? They know I fucked up. Let's just be men. Take your licks, learn from it, and it's not a fuck up anymore. It was just a learning experience.
I had that dialogue in my head too. Like I was like, man. But for me, it was like I had the opposite. I was so ashamed. I was like, dude, they're gonna fire me. Like they're gonna ask me to just like step off the team. And I was just like, see, I knew it. Like it was like this. They're like, and I was justifying. I was like, yeah, they are those kind of people. And turns out they just wanted to check in and say like, hey, we just noticed like you used to be this huge force of nature and something changed. And I was like, obviously, because I'm distracted.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, now I need to really make sure when I'm there, bring my A game. Because there's people relying on me to achieve a goal. You know what I mean? Like to literally achieve a goal.
Yeah.
And if I'm not there, then that's not doing my job.
Yeah.
And I just had to like suck it up and say, yeah, dude, they want me to do better.
Yeah.
And having that dialogue, like, that's important for human growth because we are all always growing still.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I argue that the more you grow, the more work you have to do. I used to think the more you grow, the less work you have to do. But what I'm finding is it's actually more because it's like...
You said that your games that we play with ourselves become more complex in another episode.
Yeah, and I mean, getting your yellow belt is easy. Getting your blue belt's a little bit harder. Like, each level is harder than the previous. And I used to think it was the inverse, because it makes sense. I'm getting better at this. Life should get easier, right? But I really believe that, and that's part of the fun, is that as you uncover these truths, then it uncovers some other lies that you were using to cover up these truths. And I believe it's a never-ending thing. And that's kind of like the... if you could have the attitude that each of these are learning experiences versus like shitty moments in life...
Feedback.
Then I really believe that you have a good framework for growing and enjoying a really good life because,
Yeah.
If you talk to anyone and you ask them about their childhood or how they grew up, everyone's had like really fucked up moments. It doesn't matter, rich, poor, super nice parents, whatever. Like at some point, something in life like gets really close to breaking you and you had to come back from it. Mm-hmm. For some people it might be, I didn't get my BMW when I turned 16. And for other people it's like, dude, we didn't even have like lunch, like... But
water bill got cut off or something. Yeah.
Correct. But everyone kind of has like their version of that, and I really believe like if there's something that people get out of this episode is one is like you don't have to be perfect. Don't expect to be perfect. It's actually the best thing is to not be good and to relearn what it's like to be insecure and like learn the process of getting good at multiple things, and you'll start seeing some commonalities between all those things that you do. I think the second thing was like know when you're being stubborn versus gritty, and that really requires you to be objective with yourself. And what was the last one that we were just talking about?
Oh man, like just the
that as you level up in life, it's going to continue to get even more
complexity.
Difficult. Correct. So I think I only say this because this is the way I think. It was like, once I became CEO, everything's, like I used to always just think, once I get here, life's going to be easy, and what I found is every time I've leveled up, it's not that life got worse, it's just got more complex, but the complexity added to the amount of joy that I feel from overcoming that complexity.
You're so right. It's that looking forward to it. It's the longer burn and then the release is like,
yeah,
that was worth the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, not to be crude, but it's like, when you bust a nut in 60 seconds, it doesn't feel as good as when you're holding out for like
minutes.
Yeah, the full hour. Or in my case, even if I get 15 minutes, okay, that's good for me.
Yeah, that is quite a bit with that sensation. Yeah.
Cool. So, all right. So we're kind of like at the top of the hour. I kind of summed up some of my thoughts. So, anything that you wanted to kind of leave the audience with as far as, ways to kind of motivate yourself to get past the procrastination. And how do you keep that motivation up, once you kind of, start that new activity?
Stick your hand out and make friends with people that you're doing this stuff with. Stick out your hand and make friends. They're going to come in handy later.
Yeah.
Don't fly United or Spirit. It's just not good for your progress overall. Self-actualization doesn't involve United or Spirit. But when you're in momentum, like it's okay to be in lulls where as long as you're still chipping away, that's to be expected.
Yeah.
And you don't get to choose. There's no time frame for when it's going to end, which is why the doggedness is kind of important sometimes.
Yeah. And, I think what you said kind of really made me think about, like, progress. Progress isn't linear. I think most people think, like, 2 inputs of effort should equal 1 output of progress. And, many times you might do 4 inputs of effort and no outputs of progress. And then all of a sudden that 1 extra input of effort produces 3 outputs of...
It's like a slot machine. You don't know. You just have to keep pulling.
Right.
And it's just a gamble.
And I think, at least for me, what really kind of like makes it easy is when I have like a really big goal, it just seems like really like audacious to handle. But when I start breaking it down into smaller chunks, it's like, all right, so today for my business, we have a revenue goal for the end of June, but did I do things today that would either A, raise more capital for the company, B, have more revenue for the company, or C, improve my employees in some way? And as long as I get some of these things crossed off, then I know I'm making progress. If I'm like, okay, well, today I didn't increase any revenue, like, I'm like, all right, I kind of treaded water there, but it doesn't have to be like I hit my goal. It's just that I know that I'm moving in the right direction. And I think for a lot of people is they look at the goal as opposed to the journey, and the journey, I believe, is where all the real learnings actually are. The goal is just like the icing on top of the cake once you get to the goal.
It's also a reason for your brain to like even enact all these powers. I think like you just have to have something that your brain's like, I see it, it's the target. And then you just gotta clamber your damn way there. It kind of sounds like... I hope this actually helps people.
Yeah, I think it will. Because, as we talked about it, it really helped me remember, like, the things that helped me, and it's also why, I haven't done anything, like, really new and scary, probably since I tried DMT last April, so I think it's time for me to, listen to my own advice and go do something new, and relearn and refeel what it's like to be in that stage of not just feeling like ultra confident in yourself, And
Yeah.
I think that's where you kind of can maintain the humility. Not to drone on and on, but I do believe like someone like our Orange Cheeto president, like he is only in situations that he excels in. So I think it just, that's the only way that someone could say, there's no one better than me at this. There's no one better than me at that. When there's no basis for it, because you're not in a situation where you get humbled. You're not in a situation where you're learning new things. I mean, you could just tell, like, he's reading other people's shit. He's watching, like, whatever, the morning news channel, and then tweeting. He's not looking at like the reports that he's given, and that's just an example of me, of like someone that has surrounded himself with people that just tell him what he wants to hear, and that's what has actually prevented his growth. And I know a lot of people will probably be like, well, it got him to president, and I'd be like, well, that's not really like the marker
not the
for
model of
someone
president,
being,
though.
yeah. Just because he achieved that, to me that's more of like, that's more of like what it says about where the society was at that time, and just being fed up with the status quo and wanting something different, and a matter of some guy coming along that, he didn't talk like a duck, he didn't walk like a duck, and it didn't matter if he was like a hawk that killed all the ducks. It was just the fact that he wasn't a duck, and and then whoever he ran against, just had a closet full of skeletons herself. So,
Perfect storm.
anyways, yeah. Not to get off on a tangent here. So, as always, you talked about where you teach and train. Where can someone get 100% of Brandon's focus and attention?
Oh, at a gym called Speed Power Strength in Oakland, California.
Nice. And is this like a variation of their normal shirt? It kind of has like that kind of same three lines of the.
Yeah, it's I guess Oakland versus everybody is kind of like what my boss says is the hood version of Oaklandish.
Uh-huh.
It's what the people like in the hood say. Like they say Oakland versus everybody.
Got it.
And so he kind of went with that because I was like, "What's Oaklandish?" She's like, "Well, that's the hipster brand." And I was like, Fair
Oaklandish is a hipster brand. Damn it! That means I'm a hipster.
It's okay. I own it too. So
well, and with me, as always, vapeexhale.com. 420's coming up. If you guys are looking for something good for your wife, your sister, your mom, your dad,
420's coming up.
I recommend getting a Vape Exhale unit. We were just at Magnolia Wellness today doing a training session. Everyone was doing backflips. I mean, usually I don't like to be the salesperson of my company, but when I see so many customers just literally like, I hate to use this word, but it was like panties were dropping when they were trying the Evo.
That's
so
okay. It's
I mean,
show, man.
it's super life changing, and I would say panties that were dropping in a positive way because these are all senior citizens and not hot chicks. But yeah, I mean, I was so excited.
The pens were dropping.
Dude, they were like, "This is what we needed. We're looking for a smoother way to do dabs. We just can't have the torch and nail." So it made me feel good to introduce to them something new that they could use that really improved their lives, and ultimately, like for me, like. I don't feel as bad like pushing the hard sale anymore because I know how much it helps people's lives when they switch to something like this. So, vapeexhale.com, 420. Happy Asian males. Hope you enjoyed this episode. We're going to start getting our webpage up. Our Facebook page, I think, is up now. Well, there's pictures of us on it.
2 likes!
Yes, 2 likes, you and Gordon. So I got to like it and get the third. But if you guys like it, please subscribe. I don't know if we have iTunes or anything down here, but at some point you'll be able to click the stuff down here and subscribe
we
and
got plans.
all that good stuff. All right.
All right, guys.
Thanks for watching.
See ya.
I do like the setup. I mean, being able to hear